The numbers I'm going to show you in today's recording are going to be a little bit concerning. They might be a little bit triggering for some, but in light of trying to give you the best information about what is really happening with real estate in your community, we're going to show you absolutely everything. And we're going to put a little bit of perspective behind it because I think the numbers, well, they're going to surprise most people. So if that sounds good and you're ready to talk about South Surrey real estate, White Rock real estate, let's get into it right now.
A chance to buy or sell your next home. Let's get it right.
Wicked. So let's jump into exactly what is going on. Now, I want to caveat some of these shocking numbers that I'm about to show you. And I think there's a little bit of a story here that's really quite important to make sure that I'm sharing. What you're seeing on the screen right now is the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board. So that's basically Whistler down into like the Tri Cities area, including like Richmond and Vancouver and all that sort of stuff. That is the benchmark price of what's happened in properties or for all different types of properties over the course of the last year. The blue one below is the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board, North Delta, all the way up to Abbotsford, sort of thing. I want you to notice where the spring of 2024 is sitting. We had a uptake in prices during the beginning of 2024, which looked like they peaked in and around the spring or maybe the early summer of the same year. This means that when I show you year over year numbers, they're going to be high. You see the mound there of what happened with pricing. So, there's a lot of story in between what has happened with these prices. As you can see, they're always moving, always fluid. But when I'm talking about year over year numbers, I think some of them are probably going to surprise you. So the green line is kind of the baseline where it is today. And of course, you can see the mound going over there. Now, with that being said, before I jump into what's going on kind of individually for the different sorts of products, I am going to recommend that you check out a video podcast, whether you listen on our podcast channel, you can look up Real Estate on Tap, or you watch us on YouTube. You're going to want to subscribe for when this next one gets released. Now, this is actually a thumbnail of an old video, last month's video, in fact, that we did, and it's super grainy. I realized that it was hard to get a screenshot of it for some reason, but we're going to cover two things in that video that I think you're really going to appreciate understanding. We are going to talk about market crashes. What is a market crash? What do they look like? How long do they last for? And really define what a market crash is. I think a lot of people are quite interested in understanding that a little bit better. And my business partner, Adam, and I are going to really break that down and let you know what the characteristics of something like that are, as well as what to watch out for. Now, the other thing that we're going to cover, and actually, in fact, this has already been filmed, and I know you're really going to quite enjoy it. We're going to talk about prices, and we're going to talk about why prices, when they go up, tend to go up very, very quickly. And we're going to address why prices, when they go down, tend to be a little more sticky and go down quite a bit slower. So I think you're really going to enjoy that. So if you don't listen to the podcast, you can get it on any of the podcatchers, or you can watch it on the YouTube channel. So make sure that you subscribe so you can catch that when it comes out. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in your market now. So this is condominiums. Let me get myself out of the way here so you can see a little bit better. So let's talk about condominiums. So this red line, of course, represents a balanced market, and we're looking at South Surrey White Rock as a whole right here. So you can see that that did tick down. It was kind of in and around the 17 to 18% and is just on the edge of being into a buyer's market. So demand did soften a little bit for condominiums over the course of the last month in the South Surrey and White Rock neighborhood. That has had an impact on prices. So prices have been on a relatively steady decline for about 2 months now. And you can see they've the benchmark price anyways has come down to about 606. So prices have been sliding for condominiums in the neighborhood. Over the last month, you can see that they're down about $12,500. And in the last year, one of the many big numbers I'm going to share with you right now, down about $37,200. So those are big numbers, right? Who does this market favor? Well, it favors buyers, clearly, right? Demand is slowing, prices have come down. So one thing that we're starting to notice anecdotally, and this is really for all different types of properties is we are starting to notice more movement. A little bit more showings, a little bit more phone calls, a little bit more inquiries. Does that mean the market's changing? Not necessarily, but certainly month over month, we have felt it. And I know a lot of our realtor colleagues are feeling that as well. So keep an eye out for more activity happening in the market. Affordability is still challenging for many people. We just went through and didn't get a Bank of Canada rate decrease, of course. So nothing really changed on that front. So people are still finding prices a little high for what their budgets will allow. We've talked a lot about in these videos as well that new construction, especially for condominiums, is pretty stalled. Developers are not wanting to take chances at the moment. It's too expensive for them to carry based on the interest rates and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of projects that have just completely been put on pause. So that is going to present some opportunity later on in the coming years for people. Of course, there was a big announcement as well recently about GST. So while that information is, or not information, that bill is tabled right now. So it hasn't actually been passed into law. But basically, what the premise is first-time home buyers are not going to have to pay GST up to on properties up to $1 million. Which, again, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you're going to want to find a video that we just did on that as well, because it creates an interesting narrative where new properties now, if you're in British Columbia watching this, which you likely are, will no longer have either GST on them. And we know that provincially they don't have property transfer tax on them as well. So this is only for first-time buyers for the GST credit. The property transfer tax on new construction is up to 1.1 million. And that affects anybody buying new construction as long as they're using it as their primary residence. But you have these new construction properties now that aren't being taxed like resale properties. So it's a very interesting dynamic that's going to be created. You're going to want to check out the upcoming episode about that, like I said, because I think you're going to find it really quite interesting. Let's talk about townhomes. So in South Surrey White Rock, we saw activity actually improve for townhomes in South Surrey White Rock. So you can see they come up to about 18.4%, which is on the higher end of the balanced market. Now, townhomes have steadily improved in value since about October, November of last year. And right now they're coming in at about $956,000 for the benchmark price of a townhome in South Surrey. So right now, month over month, they are down. Pardon me, that should say they're up. For not having to go back and redo these slides, they are up about $1,600 in the last month, but they are down year over year by about $21,000, as we had suspected. So who is taking advantage in a market like this? Well, buyers are. You can take advantage. There still is very good choice for townhomes in the market, albeit they are the best moving product out of the three: condos, townhomes, and detached. But you do have still quite a bit of choice out there. We have historic amounts of inventory on the market right now. Townhomes are seeing really, really good opportunities for buyers out there. So you're going to want to take advantage of that, because as I showed you, the prices are improving. And you might be wondering, why are the prices improving when you've got really good inventory options? Well, this is because that they are kind of the missing middle that a lot of people are looking for. They have the space that a lot of families need, especially the millennial generation that's having kids or has kids, and they are still relatively affordable. So this is likely going to be the market that continues to move, and prices have been going up. So every month, they are slowly getting more expensive since the latter part of last year. So something to definitely keep an eye on. When we talk about detached homes, so you can see the very thick red bar there between balanced market. Well, we are ways from that. So we're down at about 8% sales to active ratio. So that's roughly, I think, about 1 out of 11 or 1 out of 12 homes that are actually going to the market or selling. And that's pretty big numbers. That is starting to show up in prices. So we actually did see price growth since the start of the year in detached homes in the South Surrey White Rock market. But now it's starting to come down. You can see it's down at about $1.9 million. So in the last month, it shed about almost $21,000 in value. And year over year, it's down about $56,000 in value. So it is starting to, prove to be difficult. And it has been difficult for quite some time based on the inventory that's been available out there for detached homes. Anecdotally, just listing detached homes in South Surrey and White Rock, they are still getting action. The showings are still coming. People are out there looking. It's just how committed they are to making a choice, and everyone's seems to be looking for a little bit of a deal right now. So fairly enough. So who's got the advantage in a market like that? Well, buyers, of course. There's lots of inventory to choose from. You got 1 out of 11 or 1 out of 12 properties that are actually selling each month. You got lots to look at. Days on market's going up, and sellers are adjusting their prices to try try and get your attention if you're a home buyer. So this means pricing it right really matters if you're a seller. If you're not priced right, you are just for sale, but you are certainly not in the direction of getting sold. And I think prices here are going to remain challenged for a little while, just based on how difficult it is to sell a home and how much inventory there actually is out there. So, what's driving the market? What are the things that you're going to want to watch out for? You're going to want to watch out for mortgage rates. We just had a Bank of Canada announcement. They did nothing. They chose to do nothing, which is, certainly, different opinions on that, of course. But there is a lot of talk about a future rate cut coming in the summer. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Not to make any predictions or anything like that, but how many more rate cuts is it going to take until this market starts to kind of pick itself up? We'll have to see. Economic shifts. Obviously, we never know what's going on down south. There's lots of talks of maybe a trade deal happening at some point. So, we'll all stay tuned for that and see what's happening with that. But I also wonder a little bit about the apathy in the market. So, are people starting to feel maybe a little apathetic in terms of, remember that pride of being Canadian and buy Canadian that we all felt, not so long ago? Not that we're not proud to be Canadian, but I think that's probably starting to fizzle out a little bit. Real life is starting to come back and people are starting to, go back to their daily lives sort of thing, because you can't live in fear the entire time. And we do get used to, whatever conditions we have at the current time. So be interesting to see what happens if, that apathy continues to evolve. We got to watch on demand. These videos are a really good way to make sure that you're up to date on what's going on. Seasonal trends. There's been a lot of talk about a late spring market. And like as I said earlier, anecdotally, it does feel like the market has picked up a little bit in terms of, not really phone calls in action, but in fact, month over month, the sales are up, as they should be at this time of year. So, we'll have to see if that carries on into the summer, which typically slows down a little bit. And being in British Columbia, you always, always, always need to pay attention to local policy changes, because the government in BC certainly likes to do lots, for better or for worse. Anyways, make sure you check out those videos. Don't forget to subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you find these useful, if you'd like to see anything else in these, and also if you agree with the information that's being provided. It's stats though, so it's kind of hard to argue with. But curious what you're feeling in the market out there. Thanks for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next month on this same episode. Cheers.